You are 12 years old, and the world has just told you that your body is currency. The year is 1443, and in the drafty corridors of Bletsoe Castle, men in ermine-trimmed robes are calculating your worth in acres, your future in alliances, your childhood in coins. Your name is Margaret Beaufort, and though you carry the blood of kings in your veins, you are learning a truth that will define your entire existence in a realm ruled by men. A girl is never a person. She is property waiting to be claimed. The stone floor beneath your silk slippers is cold, so cold it numbs your toes even through the fabric. You stand perfectly still because you have learned that stillness is survival, that any movement draws attention, and attention from powerful men is rarely kind. They speak over your head, around you, through you, as if you were a piece of furniture, a decorative urn, something to be moved and positioned but never consulted. The air smells of beeswax and damp wool, of wood smoke and the metallic tang of winter. Your guardian, William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, gestures with a hand heavy with rings, and you watch the candlelight catch the gold, mesmerized by how something so beautiful can feel so threatening. Before we continue with Margaret's extraordinary journey from powerless child to the most formidable woman in England, I want to invite you to join this community by hitting that like button and subscribing. It truly amazes me that we're here together, people from every corner of the world, united by our fascination with these hidden stories from history. Please drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let's return to that cold castle room where a 12-year-old girl is about to have her fate decided. The transaction is almost complete. You are about to be married to John de la Pole, Suffolk's son, a gangly boy of perhaps 14 who cannot meet your eyes. The marriage will secure your inheritance for Suffolk's family, will bind your lands to their ambitions, will transform you from Margaret Beaufort, heiress, into Margaret de la Pole, wife. The distinction matters because under English law, a married woman ceases to exist as a legal entity. Everything you own becomes his. Every decision about your life becomes his. You are 12 years old, and you are disappearing. Margaret Beaufort was born into contradiction. She entered the world in 1443 as the sole heir of John Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, a man whose lineage traced directly back to John of Gaunt, and thus to the royal Plantagenet line itself. But that bloodline carried a permanent stain. The Beauforts descended from Gaunt's long affair with Catherine Swynford, a relationship legitimized only decades later. They were royal, yes, but royal with an asterisk, noble but marked forever by their bastard origins. This ambiguous status would haunt Margaret throughout her life, close enough to the throne to be dangerous, far enough to be vulnerable. When her father died before she reached her first birthday, Margaret became something both precious and perilous, one of the wealthiest orphans in England. Her inheritance was staggering, estates spanning Somerset, Dorset, Devon, properties generating thousands of pounds annually at a time when a skilled craftsman might earn £10 in a year. But this wealth offered no protection. Instead, it painted a target on her back, because in 15th century England, wealthy orphans became wards of the crown, and the king sold wardships to the highest bidder. The buyer gained control not just of the child's estates, but of the child's marriage, which meant control of the inheritance itself. Margaret was 6 months old when she became a commodity. The system that ensnared Margaret was both perfectly legal and utterly predatory. Under feudal law, when a tenant-in-chief died leaving a minor heir, that heir became a ward of the crown until reaching majority, 21 for males, 14 for females. During the wardship, the crown appointed a guardian who administered the heir's estates and, crucially, arranged the heir's marriage. The guardian profited enormously from this arrangement, pocketing much of the estate's income and ensuring the heir married someone who would serve the guardian's interests. It was trafficking dressed in legal robes, slavery justified by tradition. William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, purchased Margaret's wardship for a fortune because he recognized what she represented: generational wealth, political leverage, a chess piece that could shift the balance of power. Suffolk was one of the most influential men in England, a close advisor to the weak-willed King Henry VI, a man who had grown accustomed to bending the kingdom to his will. When he acquired Margaret's wardship, he acquired the right to marry her to anyone he chose, and he chose his own son. The arrangement was brilliant in its cynicism. By marrying John de la Pole to Margaret Beaufort, Suffolk ensured that her vast estates would become de la Pole property, administered by de la Pole stewards, generating income for de la Pole ambitions. The wedding ceremony takes place on a February morning in 1444, when frost covers the courtyard stones like scattered diamonds and your breath clouds white in the chapel air. You wear blue silk, Marianne blue, virgin blue, though the color feels like mockery given what is about to be required of you. The fabric is heavy, heavier than anything you have ever worn, and the weight of it makes you feel small and trapped, like you are drowning in expensive cloth. The chapel at Bletsoe is intimate and cold, walls of gray stone that seem to absorb warmth and sound, to swallow everything and give nothing back. John de la Pole kneels beside you, close enough that you can smell the nervous sweat beneath his velvet doublet. He is 14, barely older than you, and his hands tremble as he speaks the Latin vows that will bind your lives together. Ego, Johannes, accipio te, Margaritum, in meum uxorum. I, John, take you, Margaret, as my wife. The words echo in the small space, and you understand with perfect clarity that these sounds, these syllables pronounced by a frightened boy, have just erased your legal existence. When you speak your own vows, ego, Margarita, accipio te, Johannum, in meum maritum, you feel something inside you close off, some possibility shutting down forever. The marriage must be consummated to be legally valid, and so on your wedding night, when you are still 12 years old and your body has barely begun the transformation into womanhood, you are put to bed with your 14-year-old husband. The details of what happens in that chamber remain mercifully vague in the historical record, but the fact of it is documented with cold precision. The marriage is consummated. You are 12. The Church, which prohibits this in theory, permits it in practice because inheritance and alliance matter more than children's welfare. You learn that night what your body is for, and the lesson will scar you in ways that will never fully heal. The months following your wedding unfold in a strange, suspended reality. You live in Suffolk's household, elevated to the high table, dressed in fine woolens and fur-lined cloaks, but utterly controlled. Every letter you write is read before it is sent. Every visitor is screened and monitored. Every decision about your daily routine is made by someone else: when you wake, what you wear, what you eat, where you go. You are a countess in a gilded cage, and the bars are made of velvet and custom, which makes them no less imprisoning. You watch and learn because watching is the only power you have. At mealtimes in the great hall, you observe how Suffolk manages his subordinates, how he rewards loyalty and punishes disobedience, how he uses flattery and threat in measured doses to maintain control. You notice which lords lean in when Suffolk speaks and which lean away, who seeks his favor and who resents his influence. You are learning the grammar of power, and you are a brilliant student. Suffolk does not realize he is training his future adversary. Your husband John is kind enough in his awkward teenage way, but he is also irrelevant. He has no more control over his life than you do over yours. You are both pawns in Suffolk's game, pieces moved across a board you cannot see. Sometimes you catch John looking at you with an expression you recognize as shared captivity, and in those moments you feel something like companionship. But companionship is not enough to build a life on, and neither of you has any choice in the matter anyway. Then, with the suddenness of summer fever, everything changes. In the spring of 1444, barely a year after your wedding, John de la Pole dies. The records say fever, which in the 15th century is what records always say when someone young dies quickly. He is 14 years old, and then he is gone. And you are 13 years old, and you are a widow. The news reaches you while you are sitting in the solar, the women's chamber where noble ladies spend their days in needlework and idle conversation. You are embroidering a scene from the Annunciation, the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary to tell her she will bear God's child. Your needle is halfway through a stitch, gold thread against cream linen, when Suffolk enters without knocking. "Your husband is dead," he tells you, his voice as flat as if he were remarking on the weather. "Fever took him yesterday." You do not cry. You do not gasp. You finish your stitch, pull the thread through, and set the needle down with careful precision. "I see," you say, and your voice is steady because you learned long ago that showing emotion to powerful men is dangerous. You have been trained in composure the way knights are trained in swordplay, and your training does not fail you now. Suffolk watches you with the intensity of a merchant evaluating merchandise, and you know he is assessing your usefulness, calculating what to do with you now that his son is dead. Here is what John de la Pole's death means. Your marriage was never fully consummated in the legal sense because you were both too young for the church to recognize it as complete. This technicality is crucial. It means that Margaret Beaufort's inheritance has not transferred to the de la Pole family. Your lands are still yours. You are 13 years old, widowed, and once again one of the wealthiest heiresses in England, which means once again you are for sale. The brief period of your widowhood gives you a glimpse of something you have never experienced before: relative autonomy. You are still in Suffolk's household, still under his control, but the urgency has shifted. He must negotiate your next marriage carefully because you are now old enough to have opinions, old enough that your cooperation matters, at least marginally. You use this window to educate yourself with an intensity that surprises your tutors. You study Latin until you can read and write it as fluently as English. You master French, the language of diplomacy and court. You begin to understand the complex financial mechanisms that govern your estates, poring over account books that detail rents and harvests, learning how your wealth is generated and where it flows. Knowledge is power, or if not power exactly, then at least the foundation for strategy. You are 13 years old, and you are preparing for a war you do not yet fully understand. Your mother, Margaret Beauchamp, visits you during this period, and the two of you walk in the castle gardens where conversations cannot be easily overheard. Your mother is a survivor, a woman who has navigated multiple marriages and political upheavals, and she understands the realities you face with brutal clarity. "You must understand," she tells you, her voice low and urgent, "that your wealth is both your greatest strength and your greatest vulnerability. Men will want you for your estates, not for yourself. Never forget that distinction. You want to ask if there is any escape, any way to keep your inheritance without surrendering your body and your freedom, but you already know the answer. A woman who refuses marriage is a rebel against natural order, and rebels lose everything. So instead you ask the practical question: how do I survive? Your mother's answer is simple and devastating. You learn to play their game better than they do. The next marriage comes swiftly. King Henry VI, influenced by advisors who see opportunity in controlling your wealth, grants your wardship to Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond. The choice is politically calculated and personally catastrophic for you. Edmund Tudor is half-brother to the king, son of Owen Tudor and Catherine of Valois, the Dowager Queen. This connection to the royal family makes him a valuable political ally, but it also makes him a man who believes he is entitled to anything he wants, including you. Edmund Tudor is 24 years old when he is granted the right to marry Margaret Beaufort. You are 14. The age difference is not unusual by 15th century standards, but the power imbalance is absolute. Edmund is an experienced soldier and courtier, accustomed to command and violence. You are a teenager who has been married and widowed, who has survived but not yet learned to fight back. The marriage is arranged quickly. celebrated at Westminster with all the ceremony befitting a royal connection, and consummated with an efficiency that speaks to Edmund's priorities. What happens in the early months of your marriage to Edmund Tudor is documented in careful legal language that obscures the human reality. You move to Caldecott Castle in Wales, a military fortress far from the courts and councils where your wealth might give you influence. Edmund takes immediate control of your estates, installing his own administrators and diverting your income to fund his military campaigns. You are a source of revenue, nothing more. He is not cruel in the theatrical sense. He does not beat you or rage at you. His violence is more fundamental. He simply does not acknowledge that your desires or opinions matter at all. And then, in the winter of 1456, when you are 13 years old but have been living as Edmund Tudor's wife for over a year, you discover you are pregnant. The news brings terror because you understand what childbirth means in the 15th century, especially for someone your age. Medieval obstetrics is a blend of folk wisdom, prayer, and hope, and the mortality rates for both mothers and infants are staggering. You are facing a trial that kills women routinely, and you are barely past childhood yourself. The pregnancy progresses through a winter made darker by political chaos. The Wars of the Roses, the brutal civil conflict between Lancaster and York, is escalating, and Edmund is deeply involved in military campaigns that keep him away for months. You are alone with your growing belly and your mounting dread, attended by midwives who mean well but whose knowledge is limited and whose remedies are often useless. In August 1456, Edmund Tudor was captured by Yorkist forces. By November, he was dead plague, taking him in a cold cell at Carmarthen Castle. You receive the news heavy with child, 8 months pregnant, 13 years old, and suddenly widowed. His death stirs no grief, only fear. Edmund had been no husband, only a man who claimed your body and left you carrying the consequence. Now, without him, you are exposed, an orphaned girl surrounded by men who see your unborn child as a threat. Winter deepens. On January 28, 1457, in the fortress of Pembroke, labor comes for you like a storm. The pain is blinding, tearing through your small frame, endless and merciless. The midwives murmur prayers to the Virgin, but they cannot save you from the truth your body is not ready. Hours pass in agony until at last a cry pierces the chamber. A son. Small, fierce, alive. You name him Henry, after the king. You don't know that this fragile child will one day wear a crown, only that he has nearly killed you and somehow made you stronger. You survive, but changed. The birth leaves scars that will never heal. You will never bear another child. Something inside you is torn beyond repair. Yet from that wound comes resolve. You understand now the thin line between survival and extinction. You vow your son will not be powerless as you once were. At 15, you choose your next husband yourself, Henry Stafford, a man pragmatic enough to protect your child. This time, you negotiate the terms. Under his shelter, you begin your quiet work, forging alliances, writing letters, funding the Lancastrian cause. You learn the language of politics, of survival. Power becomes your faith. When Stafford dies, you marry Thomas Stanley, a man of cautious ambition. With him, your influence deepens. You plan, plot, and wait. Every move is for Henry. In August 1485, when your son lands in Wales and marches against Richard III, decades of patience converge. The Battle of Bosworth Field lasts hours. When the dust clears, Henry Tudor is king. You are 52, and your life's impossible mission is complete. As my lady the king's mother, you wield authority with serene precision, advising your son, founding colleges, shaping the next generation of rulers. You die in 1509, days after Henry VII, having seen your grandson crowned Henry VIII. Your tomb shows a devout woman in prayer, but stone cannot tell your truth. You were married at 12, a mother at 13, and forged from pain a dynasty. You turned helplessness into strategy, loss into legacy. In a world that treated women as property, you mastered the game and won. Margaret Beaufort, the girl who survived childbirth and built an empire, became the mother of kings. Her triumph was not luck, but will, and that will change England forever.